complex to a 6-person crew 2 days from now, just 3 weeks after 2 Americans and a Russian returned to Earth from their mission. U.S. and Russian space officials and a large gathering of family and friends are here at the Cosmodrome for this midnight ride for Feustel, Arnold, and Artemyev. After launch and a few hours of rest, we'll fly back to Moscow and await the arrival of the crew at the station on Friday. The Russian Mission Control Center outside Moscow is where we will be to bring you coverage of Friday's docking and hatch opening to culminate this initial crew rotation of 2018. In the meantime, what can be better than spring, Soyuz, station, and spaceflight? We have it all here in Baikonur, Dan, with launch time approaching. That's it from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Now back to you at Mission Control in Houston.
All right, well, back here in Mission Control Houston, we are under 10 minutes away from launch. We're 9 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. So now things will start to pick up in a couple of minutes. So why don't we take a few more Twitter questions. Again, if you have any, use that hashtag AskNASA. Why don't we go now to Stephen Lavelle, who asked, that's a long flight, what happened to the 6-hour transfers? Because they're going to be taking 2 days. So sometimes they're 6, so yours was 6, sometimes they're 2 days. Why do we tend to differ between the two?
So we generally target that 6-hour rendezvous because it's the easiest on the crew. You get up there quickly and you start to work. To get that 6-hour rendezvous completed, it really takes perfect alignment of the space station and your launch vehicle. So it's an instantaneous launch window. The space station's got to be exactly located where it needs to be in its orbit, and you launch, and you're basically chasing down the space station very quickly. In some cases, maybe the space station had to do a debris avoidance maneuver a few weeks ago, and it changed that phasing of its orbit, or in this case, the launch slid by a few days about a month ago, and that just offset that chance for that 6-hour rendezvous. So we have to down mode to the 2-day rendezvous. And then I think on our next launch, we're back to 6 hours if everything holds.
So what do you guys usually prefer? You like the 6-hour? Because it seems like it's a really long day if you're doing it all in one day. Or do you like getting and not having to be in the Soyuz for 2 days?
It's a really long day on that 6-hour, but I think it's whichever one you took to get to the space station is the one you seem to prefer. Everybody that does a 2-day says that's the best for sure, and everybody that does the 6 hours like definitely 6-hour. You got to be a 6-hour flyer.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take one more from Jacob, who wanted to know, how does live video and audio get transmitted to Earth from the station so there's no interruptions?
So they're using Russian ground sites on their ascent, at least for most of it, and that's how we're getting it. When they're on orbit, then they're relaying it through kind of I won't say deep space network, but basically a TDRS type network where they relay the signal out a little bit deeper into space, and then it gets transmitted back down to Earth. So there's as you travel around Russia and the U.S., you'll see huge radio dishes on the ground, and they're just using that to transfer the signals back and forth.
All right. Well, again, keep sending those questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll try to get to a few more before the end of today's broadcast, but we're always answering them on social media as well. For now, though, we are under 7 minutes away. So at this point, first and second stages are ready for launch. Telemetry or data has been received from the rocket, and all the primary and backup systems are ready to go. And here we have a view inside of the cabin.
So we have, that's going to be Drew Feustel in the left seat and Oleg Artemyev, and there he has what we call the Ukaska, the pointer. For the commander, they sit a little further back, and it's hard for him to reach all the switches, so he's using that to enter some data. And then you can see their talisman. It looks like Oleg's playing with his talisman there. And I think it looks like Drew has one as well. And then just off screen is going to be Ricky Arnold, and we'll get to see some live shots of him later.
Yeah, and we do have some info. So for Drew, he has, it's called Kredek the Mole, also known as Krot in Russia. It's a cartoon character that was very popular throughout Europe from the 1950s through today. The creator from the Czech Republic, a larger one, actually flew with Drew and his crew back on STS-134. So we'll see a couple of zero-G indicators, and if we get a view of Ricky Arnold, I've just been told he actually has a small hula girl to commemorate the crew's call sign, Hawaii.
That's outstanding. Being from Maryland, I thought he would have a Baltimore Oriole mascot. I know he's a huge fan.
I would have supported that. All right, but at this point, again, we are 5.5 minutes away, and we just got word that the launch key has been inserted. Yes, it's an actual key. Somebody gets to carry around the launch key.
And if you're lucky after flight, you may get that key. I did not get mine from our flight, but I have seen the launch key from previous Soyuz. My commander had his from his first flight, and it is, no kidding, an actual physical key.
What does it look like?
It's a small key that you would put into like a small lock. It's not like a giant key. It's nothing fascinating. It doesn't look like it's out of a Harry Potter movie. It's just a regular old nondescript key.
I feel like we could have so much more fun with that, like make it shaped like a rocket or something. All right, so at this point, 4 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. System's going to be switching over to onboard controls. Those cockpit displays being activated. We saw Oleg with his little pointer object that he's going to be using to help send commands throughout the Soyuz's flight to the International Space Station. And the helmet's closed, putting them on that suit oxygen. I think, as you said, it's already constantly circulating, and they can control the pressure with that little valve on their suits.
And now the crew was sitting there. They have their visor down. They're pretty much ready for launch. Now they're just in wait mode. Like you said, the suit ventilation is running and keeping them cool. It's quite comfortable when you're in this mode. Your gloves are on, so now it's a little harder to turn the pages in your book. It looks actually like Oleg is using a tablet nowadays to review his flight data file, and that makes it a little bit easier.
All right, and we just got the call. The fuel lines on the spacecraft or on the rocket are being purged with nitrogen. That helps to fireproof them, remove any of the excess vapors of that fuel and oxidizer that might be in the lines. 3.5 minutes away from launch. So 3.5 minutes away from launch. What's going through your head right now if you're in that rocket?
Now you're 100% ready. You don't want to wait anymore. You want those engines to ignite. One interesting thing, the person that they're talking to, the Russian flight controller that the crew is talking to, this person has trained you for about the last year and a half. So you're great friends. You know them super well. You probably know their family, and that's a real comforting voice. So the only person you're talking to right now outside the crew is that we call it a 1630. That's their call sign, and you know that person well.
All right, we are coming up on 2 minutes and 45 seconds, getting the thumbs up, the little fist bump from the crew there. Looks like they're definitely ready to go. And so at this point, the booster tanks are being pressurized for flight. This just helps to optimize the flow of all of that fuel. Also actually helps add some structural support to the rocket itself. Again, everything looking good. It's a night launch, so things are about to light up very much so there on the steppe of Baikonur in Kazakhstan. Teams only about a mile away watching the launch from NASA and Roscosmos. We are coming up on 2 minutes. Yeah, I don't know about you, but even watching here and not out there, you get excited. All right, 1 minute, 40 seconds away from launch. Everything continuing to count down. No issues with the rocket. Again, we're going to see some of those umbilical towers separate from the vehicle. When the second one separates, that means you're only 15 seconds away from liftoff. And those engines actually fire for quite a while, it seems, before you actually take off. Can you feel like that first fire, and then can you feel when you kind of leap off?
Yeah, you definitely can. It's not as aggressive as what I've heard a shuttle launch is like, but you can hear those engines start up, and then when they go up to 80%, you can feel the rumble in the rocket. I actually thought we were at liftoff at 80%, and my commander was laughing at me, and he said, no, about 2 or 3 more seconds, and then boom, you're underway, and you know it's a kick in the pants when you go.
It's like, Reed, no, we're still here. All right. 1 minute away.
1 minute prior to liftoff, everything is nominal on board. We are ready for launch.
All right, still getting good calls. The vehicle now on internal power. There's that first umbilical separating away. Pretty soon we'll have auto sequence start. this point, the ground propellant feed, so all the fuel flow into the rocket, has cut off. We are under 30 seconds.
Auto sequence initiated. Now we launch command issued for ignition.
And there you can see the engine starting to fire, ramping up. The second umbilical tower already separated.
Engine at
80% and liftoff. Drew Feustel, Oleg Artemyev, and Ricky Arnold taking off on their way to the International Space Station. Getting a great view of those first stage engines as they light up the night sky. That first stage delivering over 930,000 pounds of thrust.
20 seconds into flight, engines are steady.
20 seconds so far since liftoff, getting good calls that the stages are performing nominally or normally. Looking very bright here on camera. I can tell you when you see these at night, it's like looking at the sun. It almost hurts your eyes, but you can't tear your eyes away from it.
Board, and yes, we are seeing you on camera 1 screen.
"50 seconds since liftoff, everything's still nominal or normal. Soyuz rocket doing its job, all of the parameters or the data points for its trajectory looking good, continuing to rocket across the night sky. So we're 70 seconds, over a minute and 10 seconds into the flight, the vehicle already traveling at over 1,100 miles per hour.
"90 seconds into flight.
So again, this first stage going to continue firing until just before the 2-minute mark. First, we'll hear the escape tower being jettisoned. And then following that, those strap-on boosters, those 4 liquid-fueled boosters on the first stage will be jettisoned. We should hopefully get a good view of that here on the video, as it is a very crystal clear night. View inside the cabin, the crew still doing good. And getting confirmation from the visiting vehicle officer here in Houston, good first stage separation, and the escape tower has been jettisoned. That drops away at an altitude of about 28 statute miles. The Soyuz traveling at over 3,300 miles an hour.
First stage separation.
Thumbs up from the crew.
Copy.
All right, now we'll get this animation. You can see the core stage also serving as the second stage. And so 2 minutes, 30 seconds into flight. What's it like inside that capsule right now?
You get some good G-forces. You know, first stage was good. Right there with the launch shroud jettison, that's a very dynamic event. You can see out the windows, and you got thrust behind you. You're pushed back in your seat, and that makes you smile.
On board, and we also confirm on launch shroud jettison. 180 seconds into flight.
Everything's still looking great for the rocket. Over 48 miles in altitude already.
We are seeing
Traveling at a speed of about 4,700 miles per hour. That core stage, and there we go. Getting our first view of Ricky Arnold there in the right seat. All smiles looking like. And we can see his 0G indicator just over his shoulder there. The hula girl for Soyuz call sign Hawaii.
Copy, everything is fine on board. We're feeling excellent. Also,
This core stage is about 56 feet in length, 13.5 feet in diameter, and provides between 178,000 and 222,000 pounds of thrust. That depending on where they are in the Earth's atmosphere, and that continues for 3 minutes and 28 seconds of operation. Once this second stage has done its job, it'll cut off, and we'll see the third stage begin to ignite, and then the second stage will cut away and then drop back down to Earth. That's also why, if you look at this animation, just before that orange section kind of in the middle of the rocket, there's a lattice-like structure, and that allows the third stage engine to fire before that second stage drops away. But 4 minutes, 20 seconds since liftoff. Everything's still continuing to go great with the Soyuz, getting good performance calls from the teams over in the Russian Mission Control Center in Koryov.
Prior to second stage separation, copy Baikonur lead. We're standing by.
And so while they continue to fly uphill, I've always wanted to ask, when we get those in-cabin views, it almost looks boring for the crew in there. Like it almost looks like there's not a whole lot going on, but it's got to feel completely different when you're sitting in that seat.
It feels completely different when you're in that seat. There is nothing boring about this phase of spaceflight at all. This is about as exciting as it comes. Landing is maybe a bit more interesting, but this is as exciting as it comes.
Copy.
All right, well, all the crew inside. Again, NASA astronauts Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold and Oleg Artemyev, the Soyuz commander, there in the center seat. Over 5 minutes and 23 seconds into their flight. Keep an eye on all of those different talismans hanging over them. Once that third stage cuts off, you should see those start to float, and then that'll be kind of your first view of life in microgravity.
Excellent, and in celebration mood. Copy. 340 seconds into flight. Copy. And combustion chamber pressure is nominal. Copy.
And so at this point, the second stage booster is already cut away. That coming in an altitude of about 105 miles, now being propelled by that single engine of the third stage, providing 67,000 pounds of thrust. It's going to continue to burn for 4 minutes and 2 seconds until that 8 minute and 45-second post-launch mark, at which point it will cut away and separate, and the spacecraft will be in orbit.
Everything on board is fine.
Dan, everybody's always asking what it feels like inside when you launch, and in the lower right of this schematic here, you can see it almost looks like a zigzag pattern there, a jigsaw pattern, but that's the G-load that the crew is feeling. That's what's pushing them back in their seats. So you can see first stage goes up to 4G, and then when first stage cuts out, there's that huge vertical drop-off, and then second stage builds up as the fuel weight reduces, and then there's another vertical drop-off, and now they're painting a new line on third stage, so they're not even at 2 times Earth's gravity right now, so they're just gently being pushed back in their seat, just enough to know that that engine is running.
Nominal. Copy.
Those are pretty quick drop-offs.
They're instantaneous drop-offs, so you definitely feel those. Those are very dynamic phases of the ascent.
All right, well, still getting good calls, normal performance of this third stage engine. We're about 7.5 minutes into the flight, velocity approaching 13,500 miles an hour.
Everything is nominal. Copy.
Again, once that third stage is done with its job, the Soyuz will separate, and then they'll execute a series of commands, all pre-programmed in, to prepare the Soyuz to fly around in outer space. And those will allow all the onboard computers to deploy the solar arrays, which you can see the blue cells folded up alongside the body, and also a bunch of antennas. But everything's still looking great. We should have about 40 seconds until that third stage cutoff.
Nominal on board, and the crew mood is festive. And you have 30 seconds prior to third stage separation. Copy. 500 seconds into flight, everything is nominal. .510 seconds into flight. 520 seconds into flight. Please be prepared for GECA-3 command. We are ready.
And there we see that bit of a jolt. You can see the talisman starting to float, and I think they're in outer space now.
Welcome to low Earth orbit.
Congratulations with